An engine failure can be devastating and can cost upwards of $4,000, but today we're going to show you a cheap and easy way to prevent your engine from catastrophic motor failure. Hey, this is Bryan. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and check us out at KiesMotorsports.com. Now, today's video is going to primarily focus on the N54, the N55, and also the S55. Now, as many of you have probably read and seen on many forums and Facebook groups and whatnot, there is a big problem, especially with the N54 and the N55, where your belt can actually walk off of your harmonic balancer and cause catastrophic motor failure. So I have an S55 behind me for demonstration purposes. So let's take off the harmonic balancer and I'll show you what happens. So when we look at the engine, this is your harmonic balancer. Some people also call it a crank pulley because it is connected to your crank hub, which looks something like this, and is connected to your crankshaft. So let me take this off here for a minute and I'll show you what happens. Now, when this engine is in the car, typically it's tilted a little bit, and as you can see, you have things like your oil filter housing gasket, which is right over here, and it's prone to leak. Where does it go? It goes right on the belt. You also have things like coolant lines that if they start to leak, it can go right on the belt. Well, what can happen is your belt will actually start to walk off of your harmonic balancer here, and where do they go? Well, they go right in here into your crank seal. Now, what can happen is you can have little shards of your belt actually go in. They can push through the seal, and I'll show you the seal on the table in just a minute. And they do one of two things. They could either go down into your oil pan, which is a problem because they can block the oil pickup, or they're going to get sucked up into your valve cover, which again is not a good place for it to be. If you get lucky, that's pretty much what's going to happen, and there's a chance that you might be able to salvage the motor. The other thing that we've actually seen happen before is this belt will actually get sucked in, and as this is spinning, it pushes its way in, and again, just causes the oil to be blocked and just causes a tremendous amount of damage, which typically results in an engine failure. Okay, so this is the crank seal that we talked about earlier, and basically it's a piece of metal wrapped in rubber, but as you can see here, it's just very soft and flexible plastic. So that's what's actually happening when it slips through. So I'll show you on an N55 crank hub, although it looks like it fits nice, if I press this down a little bit, you can see that you can get a pretty good gap. So if you have a belt that's actually pressing through this, what's gonna happen is it's just going to compress this little piece of plastic and it's gonna get sucked right in. So how do you prevent against that? Well, you add a crank seal guard, and this is typically what's on the market right now. It's just a stamped piece of aluminum with little washers that are just welded on. And when you're installing this, one of the hard things is you have to make sure that everything is perfectly lined up. Not only left to right, but you have to make sure forward to back, because as you just saw, I was able to push it back. And sometimes it's hard to get your head down this far when you're working on your engine and you're really working from up here reaching down. The other thing why this is bad is, as you can hear, as you're driving, it's gonna be flopping around because there's nothing really stabilizing it. And you can also risk these little corners right there where the welded washers are, they can also snap while you're driving as well. The other thing you have to worry about is, depending on which place made it, you have to make sure that they have a nice tolerance and that it is nice and even around. Now, although there are a lot of guys that are running this, we came up with something a little bit better. So as we said before, one of the big problems with this one is you have to really make sure that you have it positioned, not only side to side, but also front to back, make sure that everything is sitting flat. And then you also have to worry about the weld snapping and this rattling. So what we did is we took a solid piece of 6061 T65 11 aluminum, and we machined our very own. So behold, the first ever Kies Seal Guard. Now, as we mentioned before, something that's very unique about this is it is machined out of a solid piece of aluminum, where many of the ones online look like they're made in a garage and they just have these washers that are just welded on. very unsturdy. So as we mentioned before, today's video is specifically focused on the N54, the N55, and the S55. Now the N54 and the N55 are where pretty much all of the problems lie. I'm sure that there are some cases with the S55, but this will actually fit each style. So as you can see, there is a very tight gap around here. It's 20 thousandths of an inch. So extremely tight, and it's going to be very tough for any rubber particles to get sucked in there. And it works on the N54, it works on the N55, and I didn't have a crank hub for the S55, so I used an upgraded one from Carbon. So as you can see, everything is going to fit really nice, but let me just show you how it fits before we actually get into how to install it on an N55. So as we showed before, the one that we bought online, it's very difficult to make sure it's centered because of where you have to actually get to look at it. So you might have to use your phone, you might have to just try to eyeball it up the best you can, and it's just a lot of play. And you want to make sure that you're not actually pressing up against your crank hub because that could cause other issues. Now with the Kies Seal Guard, we have this piece in the back which is going to self-center it. Now the difference between this wall and this wall is 2.5 thousandths of an inch. So what's going to happen is every time you put it in, it's going to perfectly center each and every time, even if it's a tight area. You'll also notice that that 20 thousandths of an inch gap around is way less than our other one from online. So as I put this on here, you can see that there's a really good sized gap. And then when we put this on, because of the precision in it, it's much less. And again, this will probably protect it, but it might fail over time where this is gonna be bulletproof for the car. Now, one thing that I forgot to show you earlier, as we mentioned, these are little washers that are just welded on, and this is completely machined out of one solid piece. So it's extremely strong even at these mounting tabs. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go over to John's N55 and we're going to show you step by step on how to install this. Now when you're doing this, you are going to have to detension your tensioner, and while you're here, if you haven't done so already, it's a good idea to just change out your belt, change out your tensioner, and also your idler pulley, because are items that you should be doing every 50,000 miles or so. So while we're at it, might as well change them to make sure this is going to be a bulletproof solution. So you're going to take a T50, you're going to twist this back, insert an Allen key, and we'll show you on the car when we do this. Then you're going to loosen the belt. Then you're going to remove the harmonic balancer. There are 2 E-Torques at the bottom. We're going to remove those. And one more cool thing is, as you can see with our new bolts here, these are exactly 5.8 millimeters longer than the OEM. So if I take the OEM, you will see that we accounted perfectly for the thickness of the seal guard. First part of the process is we need to remove the intake. So first off, we're going to remove the mass airflow sensor. Okay, we're gonna put that over there. And then we have a vacuum line. Okay, so just be very careful because that can be very brittle. And then this car has the pure inlet, so we need to loosen this hose clamp right here. We'll pop it out from here. Carefully pull up over here. Always make sure it's not caught on anything, which ours is just a little bit. Pull it out from here, rock it out. Okay, so then you're going to need a T60, and I'm using an Allen key. We're gonna twist this, and then we're gonna put this in here, and that's going to lock it in place. Now, if you haven't done one of these belt changes before, what I'd recommend doing is at this point, just take a picture of how the belt is wrapped around everything. And again, for this part of removing the tensioner and the idler pulley and whatnot, we do have a detailed video. We're gonna have that link below. But today's just gonna be a high level overview with that. So we're gonna compress this with a T60 Torx. Then you're going to put your Allen key in there. I like to use an Allen key. Some guys use a drill bit, but an Allen key won't stab you and a drill bit will put a hole in your hand. So I'd recommend doing that. Okay, once you've done that, you can slip the belt off. I always like to slip it off on a part that's smooth like this. If you try to pull it off somewhere where it's ridged, it's just gonna be very difficult, and it's way easier to do it this way. Okay, so I'm gonna pop this up. And now we have no pressure on our harmonic balancer. So what we need to do now is we need to remove all of those little bolts. So now what you want to do is you want to reach down to your harmonic balancer. We're going to bring it up to you so you can see what's going on a little better. And you're going to take an E10, and there are 8 of these little bolts. So you're going to unscrew it from the crank hub, and then you're going to pull it out, and then this is going to pull right off. Now you will see that there is a little lip on the crank hub. So when you actually go to line it up and whatnot and take it off, it is going to sit on there. So when you actually go to put it on and make sure that everything's lined up, you can get it, it's going to give you a little extra help when you're holding it up because it's kind of heavy. Okay, so we're going to take our E10. And as I said before, you're not going to be able to see anything I'm doing right now. Also, make sure you're doing this when the engine is cool. Otherwise, you're going to have third-degree burns. Okay, so once you have them all loose, what you can do is just very carefully take them out one by one. Okay, 1. Okay, once you've done that, you can just take the harmonic balancer. Again, it's just sitting on that little ridge right now. And you can, first make sure that there's no more, okay? So we're all good there. Then you can just start to wiggle it off to pull it out. You might need 2 hands depending on how long it's been on there for. There we go. Sometimes when they've been on there a little while, they get a little gunked up and a little bit stuck. But there it is. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to take a microfiber towel and a little alcohol, and we are going to clean that little channel like we did on the S55 before we showed it to you. And just make sure that we get all that junk out of there, because that's what it looks like. So at this point, you can see that everything is nice and clean. Okay, so now we need to release this bolt over here. If you can see where I'm pointing to, it's an E12, and then there's one on the other side, just like we did on the S55. So I'm just gonna reach down. You're probably not gonna be able to see a thing. Okay, when you're removing those E12s, what I like to do is make a little configuration like this where we actually go from quarter to the actual E12. Originally we were going to use this one, but it's just a little bit too large in this area down here. But this is going to be a great size to be able to get it. So with that, let's remove the 2 bolts that are holding this in. Okay, there's one. Okay, just loosen the second one. All right, and there's the second bolt. Now, just because we have to do it anyway, I'm going to pull the tensioner off. Again, it's with an E12, and it's gonna give me just a little bit more space to work, and it's gonna show you a little bit better what's going on. Now, when you're doing your tensioner, these bolts are one-time use, so make sure you get a new one. If you buy the kit that we have, it includes a new one. And then you can just take this, might get a little bit stuck, you just wiggle it out. Okay, I'm just gonna get this belt out of the way. Now let's see, looks okay. Not terrible for 40,000 miles. Okay, so then you can just reach down. And like we said, the beauty of it is it just pops right into place. Then you can take the supplied bolts and thread these in there. Okay, and then we're gonna install the second one. Just tighten it by hand for the time being. Then what you can do is go back and you're gonna tighten those 2 bolts we just installed to 22 Newton meters. Now again, this is really good if you can get some kind of 1/4 inch adapter onto your E12, because this is much easier to fit down there than a standard size torque wrench. It's also a good idea to just snug them up a little bit so you're not twisting and twisting before you torque. You just kind of tighten them up and then click, click, and you're done. Okay, I'm starting with the back one first. It's really tight, you get about 1 click at a time. Okay, that one's torqued. All right, and both are torqued. So with that, the Kies Seal Guard is fully installed and it looks so good. It's a shame we're never really gonna see it. So with that, we can start to put the belt back on. As you know, we took off the tensioner, so I'm going to reinstall that with my new bolt. We're gonna torque that down to 38 Newton meters. Okay, we are also doing the idler pulley here too. So this has a little cap. If you look at it and think, How's that come off? And then there's the Torx. Okay, then you're gonna take a T50. We're going to remove this pulley here. Now this one's torqued down a lot more than the tensioner. It's torqued down to 60 Newton meters. So when you go to take it off, you might want to get a little breaker bar to get things started before you put it on a regular ratchet. Okay, so then you can take your pulley and you can thread it in. Now when you're threading it in, just hold the pulley and spin here to get it started, because if you try to spin this, there's just a bearing and it's just gonna free spin on you. So line it up, spin it in, and then torque it down to 60 Newton meters. And then you can take the little dust shield to protect the bearing, and you just push that on, just like that. At this point, it's time to reinstall our harmonic balancer. Now, when you torque it, the torque spec is 35 Newton meters. And when you're doing it, you're gonna go top, bottom, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you might wanna write this down if you don't already have it, just for reference. And again, it is 35 Newton meters. So at this time, I'm going to put it on. And again, when you actually just sit it there, there's a little bit of a lip, so it's gonna be able to hold it on pretty easy for you. And then from there, we're just gonna hand twist everything in. And then you might wanna go back with some kind of ratchet and just snug it up just a little bit, so with a torque wrench, you're not just going round and round. And then we're gonna torque it up and put the belt back on, and we're done. All right, so now it's torque time. So we're gonna torque all of these down to 35 Newton meters. And again, these are an E10. Okay, so now we're going to get our belt. Remember, if you don't know which way it goes on, it's good to take a picture before, and you can reference that now. So you want to make sure that, I like to throw it over the harmonic balancer first, because that's by far the most challenging, just because of how large it is. Okay. I'm gonna go over here, under here, make sure it's all fully seated. Just reach your hand around the harmonic balancer, make sure that it's fully on, because otherwise it's not gonna work out. Okay, make sure that's fully seated like that. Okay, your belt should fit pretty tight. You don't want it to be flopping around. And if you have like a foot of extra belt, you didn't route it correctly. So make sure you do that. So it goes over the harmonic balancer, up around the alternator, down, then back up, and then back around. Now, before you actually start your car or anything, you want to make sure that everything is fully seated. Typically it won't fit if it's not. We don't want any belts shredding. Okay, everything feels really good. So at this point, what we can do, we can take our T60 again, put it in here. Make sure it's fully seated. You just have to tighten it enough to get this pin out, and that's it. Now, just a little quick tip. I know we've already been talking about feeling the belt, making sure everything is properly placed. Look right here. You should be able to see this little metal gap. That's kind of the little barrier that protects it from going over, even though it doesn't work all that well. But you want to make sure that that belt is perfectly flat. And once you've done that, we can put the intake in. We're going to install the air box back in. Let's start with this side. Make sure you're not pinching anything. Make sure your air duct lines up properly. Then you can press that into the grommets and tighten up your hose clamp. And then you can take your vacuum line, clip that back in, mass airflow sensor, plug that in, pop it down on this little grommet here. And then once we do that, everything is fully installed. And that's how easy it is to prevent catastrophic motor failure in your N54, N55, or S55. Now, the S55 and the N54 are slightly different, but it's the same basic principles. Once again, this is Bryan. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you are interested in any of the parts or tools we showed in today's video, be sure to see the links in the description. If you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and check us out at KiesMotorsports.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.